Germany was supposed to be the comeback story of the decade. The headlines wrote themselves. Reserves full, lights on, crisis averted. The panic of 2022? Ancient history. Except it's not, because what most people call a comeback is actually a very expensive holding pattern, one that's quietly bleeding the industrial core of Europe's largest economy. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. Germany didn't solve its energy crisis. It bought time, and time, as it turns out, is not a substitute for a functioning energy system. The myth goes like this: Germany moved fast, diversified suppliers, embraced renewables, and now everything's fine. Growth is back. The worst is behind us. The reality? Germany replaced one dependency with another, swapped cheap Russian pipeline gas for premium LNG, turbocharged renewables without upgrading the grid to handle them, and is now watching its industrial base quietly pack up and leave, not because of politics, but because of physics. This isn't a story about good intentions or bad actors. It's a story about bottlenecks, physical, structural, bureaucratic, the kind that don't care how many press releases you write. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through 7 reasons why Germany's energy comeback is mostly optics and duct tape. From the grid that can't move power where it's needed, to the factories shutting down because electricity costs more than the product, to the political backlash that's already building in living rooms across the country. By the end, you'll understand why this isn't just Germany's problem. It's a warning label for every country trying to execute an energy transition under pressure. Let's start with the part that sounds good on paper, but collapses the moment you look under the hood. Because in 2022, when Russian gas stopped flowing and German officials realized the country was 3 months away from industrial blackout, the response was fast, expensive, and temporary. Emergency LNG terminals were built in record time. Floating platforms anchored offshore, pipelines rerouted, storage facilities filled at any cost. Politicians stood in front of cameras and called it a new energy independence. But independence and substitution are not the same thing. What Germany actually did was replace a cheap, reliable supplier with a global spot market, one where prices spike every time a typhoon hits the Gulf Coast or a labor strike shuts down an Australian export terminal. And here's the kicker: the system isn't designed to run on LNG long-term. The terminals are temporary. The contracts are short. The infrastructure is provisional. It's the economic equivalent of driving cross-country on a donut spare tire. Technically functional, but one pothole away from disaster. So yes, the lights stayed on. Yes, factories kept running. Most of them, anyway. But calling that a solved crisis is like calling a tourniquet a cure. The real question isn't whether Germany survived the winter of 2022. It's whether the system can survive the next 10 winters without cheap pipeline gas, without nuclear, and without a grid capable of moving renewable power from where it's generated to where it's actually needed. Spoiler, it can't. Not without fixes that Germany keeps announcing, but never quite building. So how did we get here? And why does the gap between the myth and the reality keep growing? Let's talk about what Germany actually built in 2022. When the gas taps turned off, the country didn't have time to redesign its energy infrastructure. It had time to panic and then improvise. So it did what any country would do in an existential crisis. It threw money at the problem and hoped physics would cooperate. The result was a patchwork of emergency measures that looked impressive in press photos, but were never meant to last. Floating LNG terminals anchored off the coast. Diesel generators on standby. Coal plants yanked out of retirement. Industrial users paid to shut down during peak hours. It worked. Sort of. Germany made it through the winter without blackouts, without rationing, without the kind of social unrest that happens when the heat goes off in January. But here's the part nobody says out loud. That system is still running. The emergency fixes from 2022 are now the baseline. The floating terminals that were supposed to be temporary? Still there. The coal plants that were supposed to be phased out? Still burning. The demand reduction deals with heavy industry? Still in effect. And this is where it gets ugly. Because every one of those fixes comes with a price tag, and not just in euros. Floating LNG terminals cost more to operate than pipelines. Coal plants emit more than gas. And paying factories to shut down doesn't create jobs. It destroys them, slowly, one shift at a time. What Germany built wasn't a new energy system. It was a very expensive bridge to nowhere. The myth was that the bridge would buy time to build something permanent, more renewables, more storage, more grid capacity. The reality is that the bridge became the destination. Here's why. Building permanent infrastructure takes years. Permits, environmental reviews, community consultations, legal challenges. Even in a crisis, bureaucracy doesn't move fast, it just pretends to. Meanwhile, the floating terminals keep running. The coal plants keep burning. And every month that goes by, the temporary solution gets a little more permanent, because replacing it would mean admitting the whole thing was a band-aid. Let that sink in. Germany's energy strategy for the next decade isn't a strategy. It's a holding pattern built on LNG spot prices, mothballed coal, and crossed fingers. And the cost? It's already showing up in electricity bills, industrial closures, and export competitiveness. So yes, Germany survived the crisis of 2022. But surviving a crisis and solving a crisis are not the same thing. One keeps you alive for another year. The other builds a foundation. Germany chose survival. And now it's paying the price for not choosing a foundation. But even if Germany wanted to build that foundation today, there's a problem. A big one. A physical one. One that has nothing to do with political will or investment capital. The power exists. The country is generating it. It just can't move. Because here's what most people don't realize. Energy infrastructure isn't like software. You can't just download an update and scale it overnight. You need steel, concrete, copper, land, and most importantly, time. Germany's wind farms are spinning in the north. Solar panels are soaking up sun in the south. On paper, the country is producing clean energy. But the grid connecting them was designed in the 1970s for a completely different system. One where big coal and nuclear plants sat near industrial centers and pumped out steady, predictable power 24/7. Renewables don't work that way. Wind doesn't blow on demand. The sun doesn't shine at night. And when they do produce power, it's often in the wrong place at the wrong time. So Germany ends up with a bizarre paradox. Wind farms in the north generating electricity nobody can use, while factories in the south pay through the roof for power that barely makes it through the bottleneck. The emergency fixes papered over that problem for a year, maybe two, but the cracks are starting to show. And unless something changes, unless Germany can move power as fast as it can generate it, the comeback will stay exactly where it is right now, stuck in neutral, burning cash, and hoping the lights stay on. So what's stopping them from just building more grid capacity? Here's the dirty secret about Germany's renewable energy boom. The power is there. It's real, it's clean, and it's completely useless if it can't get to where it's needed. Welcome to the North-South bottleneck, the invisible wall quietly strangling Germany's energy transition. Picture this. Up in the north, along the coast, massive offshore wind farms spin at full capacity. The wind is strong, consistent, relentless. On a good day, those turbines generate more electricity than the region can possibly use. Meanwhile, down south, in Bavaria, in Baden-Württemberg, factories are screaming for power. Chemical plants, steel mills, auto manufacturers, the industrial heartland of Europe. They're separated by about 600 kilometers. And the grid connecting them? It was built for a different era. Back when Germany's energy system was designed, the logic was simple. Build big power plants near the people who need the electricity. Coal in the Ruhr Valley, nuclear in the south. Keep transmission distances short. Keep costs low. It worked for that system. But renewables flipped the map upside down. Suddenly, the best wind is where the fewest people live. The best solar is in rural areas. And the industrial demand is stuck in the same place it has always been, far away from where the clean energy is being generated. So now you've got a system where electricity flows like water through a pipe, except the pipe is too narrow, too old, and in some places barely exists at all. And here's the kicker. Germany knows this. Planners have known it for over a decade. They've drawn up plans, held press conferences, announced timelines. The grid upgrades supposed to be finished by 2020? Still not done. The high-voltage transmission lines meant to connect north and south? Most are still stuck in the permitting process. Why? Because building infrastructure in Germany is like running a marathon through a minefield of lawsuits, environmental reviews, and local opposition. Every new transmission line needs approval from dozens of municipalities. Every route gets challenged by landowners, environmental groups, and NIMBYs who don't want towers in their backyard. So the projects stall. Years go by, and the bottleneck gets worse. On windy days, wind farms in the north have to shut down, not because there's no demand, but because the grid can't handle the load. It's called curtailment, and it's expensive. Germany pays wind farm operators to not produce electricity, while factories in the south pay premium prices for power that's being generated hundreds of kilometers away, but can't physically reach them. Let that sink in. The country is paying people to not make clean energy because the wires aren't there to move it. That's not an energy transition. That's a logistics failure dressed up in green rhetoric. Even when new lines do get approved, construction takes years. High-voltage transmission isn't a software update. It's steel towers, underground cables, transformers, substations. You can't 3D print a power grid. Meanwhile, renewable capacity keeps growing. More wind, more solar, more power being generated in places the grid wasn't built to handle. The gap between generation and transmission is widening, and every year it widens, the system gets more fragile. Germany ends up in this absurd situation, building the future on one end, clean, renewable energy, while running it through infrastructure from the past. It's like streaming 4K video over a dial-up modem. Technically possible, practically a disaster. And the worst part? This isn't a problem you can just throw money at. You can't bribe a transmission line into existence. You can't shortcut the permitting process without triggering a political firestorm. And you can't ignore the people whose land you need to cross. So the bottleneck stays. The curtailments continue. And every month, the industrial South inches closer to asking a very uncomfortable question. If the power can't get here, why stay? But even if Germany somehow solved the grid problem overnight, if every transmission line magically appeared tomorrow, there's still another wall in the way. One that's even harder to break through than steel and copper. What happens when the thing stopping you isn't the grid, but the paperwork? Let's say you wanted to build a new transmission line in Germany. Not a coal plant, not a nuclear reactor, just a wire. A big wire to move clean energy from point A to point B. How long do you think that takes? 5 years. Try 10, sometimes 15. And that's if everything goes perfectly. Welcome to the bureaucratic wall, the part of Germany's energy crisis that doesn't make headlines, but quietly kills every solution before it gets off the ground. Here's how it works. You propose a project. Environmental impact study. Public consultation. Municipal approval. Regional approval. Federal approval. Legal challenges. Appeals. Counter-appeals. Revisions. Resubmissions. By the time you're done, the crisis you were trying to solve has evolved into 3 new crises. And here's the beautiful irony. Germany is really good at announcing projects. Press conferences, funding commitments, glossy timelines with ambitious targets. But actually building them? That's where the system breaks down. Because in Germany, everyone has veto power and everyone uses it. Environmentalists block projects for disrupting bird migration. Landowners block projects for lowering property values. Local politicians block projects for upsetting voters. So nothing moves. The country announces a renewable future while the present stays frozen in permitting hell. Let that sink in. Germany has the money. It has the technology. It has the political will, on paper. What it doesn't have is the ability to execute at the speed the crisis demands. And the cost isn't just delays. It's momentum. It's credibility. It's the slow realization that Germany can't build its way out of this, because it can't build anything fast enough to matter. But here's the part nobody says out loud. This isn't incompetence. It's design. Germany built a system where every stakeholder gets a say. That works great when you have time, when the stakes are low, when compromise is an option. But in a crisis, it's paralysis dressed up as democracy. And every month the paralysis continues. The gap between ambition and reality grows wider. So what happens when the system can generate power, but can't move it, can't build it, and can't keep it steady when the wind stops blowing? Quick thing before we go deeper. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. We're breaking down the systems nobody else wants to touch. More videos like this coming. Now, back to the bottleneck. Because here's the next problem. Even if Germany solved the grid, even if it bulldozed through the permits, there's still one question nobody wants to answer. What do you do when the sun sets and the wind dies? Here's the problem with wind and solar that nobody likes to talk about. They're unreliable. Not because the technology is bad, but because physics doesn't care about your electricity bill. The sun doesn't shine at night. The wind doesn't blow on schedule. And when both decide to take a break at the same time, the grid starts sweating. This is called the firm power gap, and it's The hole at the center of Germany's energy transition that nobody has figured out how to fill. Firm power is the boring, unglamorous stuff that keeps the lights on 24/7. Coal, gas, nuclear. The kind of energy you can count on, rain or shine, summer or winter, windy day or dead calm. Renewables are the opposite. They're abundant when conditions are right, and useless when they're not. And here's the kicker. Germany shut down its nuclear plants, mothballed its coal fleet, and replaced them with hope. Hope that the wind blows. Hope that the sun shines. Hope that batteries get cheap enough, fast enough, to store power for the days when neither cooperates. Spoiler, hope is not an energy strategy. Because on a cold, windless January night, the kind of night when everyone cranks up the heat, renewables go to zero. And when that happens, Germany has two options: fire up the gas plants or import power from France's nuclear reactors. Neither is cheap, neither is clean, and neither is what the brochures promised. Let that sink in. Germany is betting its industrial future on a system that works beautifully 70% of the time and falls apart the other 30%. And the gap is getting worse. Because every coal plant that closes, every nuclear reactor that shuts down, takes firm power off the table. So what fills the gap? Gas. Expensive, imported, carbon-heavy gas. The very thing Germany was supposed to be moving away from. This is the unspoken trade-off at the heart of the energy transition. You can have clean energy, or you can have reliable energy. But right now, you can't have both, not without a breakthrough in storage that hasn't happened yet. And while everyone waits for that breakthrough, factories are quietly doing the math. If electricity is cheap and reliable, we stay. If it's expensive and unreliable, we leave. Guess which direction the trend is going? Remember when Germany replaced Russian pipeline gas with LNG and everyone called it a win? Yeah, about that. LNG isn't cheap gas. It's expensive gas that got even more expensive because half of Europe is buying it at the same time. Here's what happened. When Russian gas stopped flowing, Germany didn't just lose a supplier. It lost the cheapest energy source in Europe. Russian pipeline gas was dirt cheap, reliable, delivered straight to German industry at prices that made manufacturing competitive. LNG? Not even close. Liquefied natural gas has to be supercooled, loaded onto ships, transported across oceans, regasified at terminals, and then pumped into the grid. Every step adds cost. Every middleman takes a cut. And here's the kicker. Germany is now competing with Japan, South Korea, and China for the same LNG cargoes. When demand spikes, prices spike. When a hurricane shuts down a Gulf Coast terminal, prices spike. When winter hits and everyone needs heating, prices go through the roof. Germany went from paying bottom dollar for pipeline gas to paying top dollar for spot market LNG. That's not energy independence. That's trading one dependency for a more expensive one. And the impact? It shows up everywhere. Electricity prices that were once the envy of Europe are now among the highest. Chemical companies that built entire business models on cheap gas are shutting down operations. Fertilizer plants, aluminum smelters, steel mills. They're not closing because they're inefficient. They're closing because the energy costs more than the product. Let that sink in. Germany built the industrial core of Europe on cheap Russian gas. And when that disappeared, the core started cracking. So yes, LNG kept the lights on. But it didn't keep the factories running, not at a price that makes sense. And the worst part? This isn't temporary. LNG prices aren't coming down. The global market is tight. New export capacity takes years to build. And Germany is stuck paying whatever the market demands. This is the hidden cost of the energy transition nobody talks about. You can replace the source, but you can't replace the economics. And when the economics don't work, industries don't stick around to find out what happens next. So where do they go? Here is a question nobody wants to ask out loud. What happens when Germany stops being a good place to make things? Not because of taxes, not because of labor costs, but because the electricity is too expensive and too unreliable to justify keeping the factory open. Welcome to Deindustrialization by Spreadsheet, the slow, quiet exodus of industrial capacity that doesn't make headlines until it's too late. Germany's industrial advantage was always energy. Cheap, reliable, abundant energy. That's what powered BASF, ThyssenKrupp, Volkswagen. That's what made Made in Germany mean something. But when energy prices triple and supply becomes unpredictable, the math changes. Chemical companies need consistent, 24/7 power to run reaction processes. You can't turn a chemical plant off and on like a light switch. Either it runs continuously or it doesn't run at all. Steel mills, aluminum smelters, glass manufacturers, same story. These aren't businesses that can pause production when electricity gets expensive. They need baseload power. And if they can't get it at a competitive price, they move. Not immediately, not with press releases, just quietly. A plant closes for maintenance. A new facility opens in the U.S., where natural gas is cheap. An investment gets redirected to Asia, one factory at a time, one job at a time. And here's the brutal part. Once that capacity leaves, it doesn't come back. You don't rebuild a chemical plant because energy prices drop 10%. You rebuild it where prices are stable and cheap for the next 20 years. Let that sink in. Germany isn't just losing jobs. It's losing industrial DNA, the expertise, the supply chains, the ecosystems that took decades to build. And the scary part? This is just the beginning. Because if current trends continue, Germany will become what economists call a high-cost, low-energy security economy. Great for services, great for software, terrible for making physical things that require lots of power. The factories won't disappear overnight, but in 10 years, 20 years, Germany's industrial base could look very different. Smaller, hollowed out, dependent on imports for things it used to make itself. And all because the energy transition happened without solving the one thing that mattered most: keeping electricity cheap and reliable for the industries that actually need it. So yes, Germany has wind farms, solar panels, LNG terminals, all the pieces of a modern energy system. But it's missing the one piece that holds an industrial economy together: affordable, dependable power. And without that, the factories follow the spreadsheet every single time. But the political cost might arrive even faster than the economic one. Because while policymakers argue about grid capacity and renewable targets, regular people are starting to feel it in their homes. Here's the thing about energy transitions: they are a lot easier to sell when people don't feel them in their wallets. But when heating bills double, when electricity costs eat into grocery budgets, when the government tells you to turn down the thermostat in winter while factories shut down for lack of power, that's when the politics get ugly. Germany's energy transition was always built on a social contract. Yes, it'll cost more in the short term, but we're building a cleaner, more secure future. The problem? The costs arrived on schedule. The future didn't. And now the backlash is building, not in parliament, not in think tanks, but in living rooms across the country. Pensioners who can't afford to heat their apartments. Small business owners crushed by energy surcharges. Workers watching their employers relocate to countries where electricity doesn't cost a fortune. These aren't abstract concerns. They're kitchen table politics. And they're starting to shift the conversation. Because here's what nobody planned for. Energy isn't like healthcare or education. You can debate those. You can compromise. But when it's January and the heat doesn't work, there's no middle ground. People tolerate higher prices when the system works. But when the system is expensive and unreliable, that tolerance evaporates fast. And here's the kicker. The politicians who champion the energy transition are now facing voters who want answers. Not speeches, not 5-year plans. Answers. Why is my heating bill triple what it was 3 years ago? Why are factories closing while we're building more wind farms? Why does the power go out when it's needed most? Let that sink in. The energy transition was supposed to unite the country around a common goal. Instead, it's becoming a wedge. Urban versus rural, industry versus environmentalists, future versus present. And the longer the costs stay high without visible payoff, the more that wedge deepens. This is the political gravity of energy policy. You can ignore economics for a while. You can ignore engineering. But you can't ignore people's heating bills. Not forever. So here's the uncomfortable question starting to circulate in back rooms and beer halls alike. Was it worth it? Not in theory. Not on paper. But in practice, right now, today, are German families and businesses better off than they were before the transition started? And if the answer is no, what comes next? Because the backlash doesn't stay rhetorical. It turns into votes, policy reversals, populist movements that promise cheap energy and don't care how they deliver it. Germany built its energy future on the assumption that people would accept short-term pain for long-term gain. But the pain has lasted longer than promised. And the gain? Still waiting. So the loop tightens. High costs fuel public anger. Public anger fuels political pressure. Political pressure fuels policy uncertainty. And uncertainty makes everything worse, because no one invests in a system they don't trust to last. And round it goes. The myth was that Germany could transition smoothly, that the markets would adjust, the technology would catch up, and everyone would come out ahead. The reality is messier, harder, and increasingly politically unstable. But here's the real question, the one that cuts through all the noise. If you had to choose one, restart nuclear, even if it's politically toxic, or double down on renewables plus gas plus imports, even if it's expensive and uncertain, which is the lesser evil, and why? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where people land on this. So here's where we are. Germany didn't solve its energy crisis. It postponed it, papered over it, declared victory while the cracks kept spreading. The myth was clean, the execution was messy, and the bill is coming due. In electricity prices, factory closures, and a political backlash that's just getting started. Let's be clear, this isn't about good intentions. Germany tried. It invested billions. It built infrastructure at record speed. It did things other countries said were impossible. But trying isn't the same as succeeding. And speed without direction just gets you lost faster. The North can't send power to the South. The permits take longer than the crisis. The renewables work beautifully until they don't. The LNG costs more than the factories can afford. And the people paying the bills are starting to ask very uncomfortable questions. This is what happens when you execute an energy transition under pressure, without solving the fundamentals first. Germany gambled that technology would catch up, that markets would adapt, that people would stay patient. But physics doesn't negotiate. Economics doesn't wait. And voters don't forget. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Germany's energy system right now is a bridge. Not to the future, to nowhere. A temporary fix that became permanent because building the real solution takes longer than anyone wants to admit. And the worst part? Other countries are watching, taking notes, asking themselves, if Germany, with all its resources, all its engineering expertise, all its political will, can't make this work smoothly, what chance do we have? That's the real cost of the myth. Not just the money, not just the factories, but the credibility. Because energy transitions aren't just technical projects. They're trust exercises. And when trust breaks, so does everything else. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's this: you can't shortcut an energy system. You can't skip the boring parts, the grid upgrades, the storage, the firm power, and hope renewables will carry the load alone. You can't declare victory before the war is won. And you definitely can't ask people to pay for a future that never seems to arrive. Germany's energy comeback isn't a myth because it failed. It's a myth because it hasn't happened yet. And until the fundamentals are fixed, until power can move where it's needed, until prices stabilize, until factories stop leaving, it won't. The lights are on, for now, but the system holding them up is fragile, expensive, and running on borrowed time. And across the border, in France, the postcard still looks perfect. Nuclear reactors humming, electricity prices stable, industrial base intact. But if you look a little closer, the balance sheet is starting to scream. That's the next story. If this breakdown made you think differently about energy policy, hit subscribe. We're going deeper into the systems everyone takes for granted until they break. See you in the next one.